Hello, I'm Ruth from MarkTwo Consulting. Welcome to this webinar about 3 major leadership mistakes even your experienced managers are making, hosted by MarkTwo Consulting. I'd like to introduce the CEO, Mark Oliver. Mark has almost 30 years experience in the field of leadership development and coaching and is the author of a book describing his innovative model to understand leadership called The 7 Motivations of Life. I'd now like to hand over to Mark.
Thanks, Ruth, and welcome. Welcome to everybody. Here we are to talk about 3 major leadership mistakes even your experienced managers are making. And I'd like to make this as helpful as possible. And in this webinar, we'll explore 3 major mistakes even your experienced managers are making, which are causing demoralized staff and poor productivity. So it's actually costing companies money. And staff engagement directly affects success. We see it in research time and again. In study one after another, we've got studies that say that only about 18% of workers are engaged, are actually trying to help the company. About 60–70%, it does depend culturally where, but they are disengaged. They're really just going through the motions, doing what they have to do. And then you've got sometimes more people than engaged are actively disengaged. They're very stressed, they're ill, or they're just so angry they're trying to damage the company. It's a bit of a wonder, really, that companies can make a profit. I mean, the good news is that most companies are in this situation. But by knowing these things, you can change that for your company and make sure it doesn't apply to yours, or it minimizes the impact on your company. And that's where the real benefits can come. So 3 simple mistakes can make or break engagement. A lot of Gallup research around this, with direct earnings impact relative to competitors, results from the ratio of engaged to disengaged employees having a significant bottom line result. So if we look at the ratio, you've got disengaged, engaged, and the sort of earnings impact that occurs. For every 1 disengaged, if you've got about 9.3 engaged, then earnings are up 47%. That's 47% against competitors. If you've got 1 disengaged person to 2.6 engaged people, then that puts you at less than 2% earnings compared to the average competitor. So direct effects are significant in terms of financial success. Now, in the 2013 State of American Workplace report, it noted that disengagement was costing the US between $450 and $550 billion directly. Now, proportionally in Australia, that would be about $52 billion, and there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't be affecting companies in Australia to the same degree as in the US. In fact, there's a lot of cultural similarities. Now, I'm Mark Oliver, CEO and MD of MarkTwo Consulting. And our business is enhancing the performance of individuals and organizations through leading-edge coaching and programs that transform leadership skills, self-awareness, and capability. Do stay to the end of this webinar, as there'll be an opportunity to take a free personal motivational report, which covers the 3 things individually and will give you an insight in how they may impact you. Now, stopping making these mistakes gets measurable results. For instance, one client we worked with, David Bow, commented that the training really had been an inspiration to his team, helped them gain a greater understanding of themselves and how they impact the teams they lead. And this led directly, or helped lead to, a 250% increase in employee engagement. That's about an 80% increase in profit on the bottom line. Very significant effects. And that's through helping teams to understand these mistakes and to put in place practical strategies and personal development that minimizes the negative impact. So what are the mistakes? Well, number 3, it's nice and simple, is giving ineffective feedback. The operational definition for feedback is simply information given in response to a product, a person's performance on a task, etc., used as a basis for improvement. What feedback isn't is telling someone only what they did wrong or what was bad, nor is it punishment, tempted as we may be at times. Being effective with your feedback is important because two basic types of feedback are given. And if you use them at the wrong time, then they damage engagement and productivity and lead to all the costs we've sort of discussed already. One is criticism, where you focus on what was wrong. There is a time for it, but more effective is praise, focusing on what was right. Now, studies repeatedly show that by increasing employee engagement, you add directly to the bottom line. For instance, engaged employees repeatedly deliver 4 times more value. And I'm sure you can all appreciate that the way we give feedback is going to impact the engagement of employees, especially if I'm a manager. I'm giving feedback in one form or another many times a day. Conversely, studies also show that disengaged employees do worse and deliver low value. So opportunity abounds. There is unconscious feedback in many conversations. There are therefore so many opportunities to get it right or to get it wrong, to engage or to disengage. In fact, giving effective feedback is low-hanging fruit because we do it so many times in the workplace and actually at home that if we learn to do it better and stabilize the way we give it, then we are continually engaging people more, improving relationships, and at the end of the day, getting productivity in whatever terms are relevant, whether it's workplace productivity or even home-based productivity. Now, done well, because we're all the same. Humans are the same, whether it's different cultures or different ethnic groups or different genders. At the heart of it, we're all the same, and the same sort of feedback which is effective applies. So the question is, how to feedback effectively? And there are many ways. Now, the 7 motivations was mentioned right at the front by Ruth, and this model shows that there are 7 fundamental levels of motivation and 7 possible levels of motivational feedback. The motivational levels are shown there: survival, pleasure, power, compassion, courage, wisdom, and meaning. But the level of feedback is different for each level, and we only have time to talk about the bottom 4 ways for giving feedback for now, and the effect is more positive as we go higher. So if we look at the bottom 4 levels, you've got level 1 feedback, which is criticism of the person; level 2 feedback, which is critique of the task; level 3 feedback, which is sandwich feedback. It can be open or closed sandwich, and I'll touch on that in a moment; or level 4 feedback, asking about their feelings on their performance. Let me give you an example. Level 1 feedback might be saying to someone, "You performed poorly on task X by missing the deadline." With the same issue, level 2 feedback might be, "Task X was late, which meant that Team Z were not able to complete their job." Level 3 feedback for the same situation could be, "The way you planned task X was good preparation to succeed, but despite that, you failed to complete it on time." Now, this would be an open sandwich because we say something good and we say something bad. A closed sandwich would be good, bad, and then good. And I'm not recommending this approach. Level 4 feedback in some ways looks more indirect, and this is where questions start and the power of questions. And might be something like, "How do you feel you went on task X?" Now, there's no way to bet, but as we go higher, when we use a higher level of feedback, we tend to get a better response and more engagement. The key is that we want our feedback to continually be working in the right direction. So, little feedback exercise for you. Just have a thought for the moment. When have you recently given feedback to someone? What level was it? Try and think of an example. A simple example is good. The simpler the better in many ways. Now let's do an exercise. And this is to help you use enhanced feedback back in the workplace and so increase team productivity. It will also have the byproduct of helping you in the home environment as well if you use it. But write down how you could have given that feedback for each of the 4 levels of feedback in turn, starting at level 1. Use the feedback styles given as shown, And you've just got 30 seconds to write down your answer. It's a tough call. Just see how far you get. Okay, I'll let you continue in your own time. And just to keep going, there's something called the Losado ratio. And what it is that researchers have gone into workplaces, and just by looking at the ratio of positive to negative effects, what they mean by that is positive effect would be praise or positive body language, a smile. Negative effect would be criticism or negative body language, a grimace or a shrug. Now, just by looking at that ratio in a workplace, they've been able to predict whether the workplace was healthy or not. So, quick question for you. What is the proportion of positive to negative effects in your workplace or in your team? You can make it more localized. Just have a think for 30 seconds. This is more art than science, but what would be the ratio? Of course, it would vary, but typically, what would it be? Just note that ratio down somewhere so you can refer to it in a minute. Okay, well, what they found was the following. Where the ratio was 12 to 1, 12 positives to 1 negative, it was a nice team environment, but not effective. Not much got done. Everybody was nice to each other, but didn't really do anything. Where it was 1 to 1 or lower, it was a nasty team environment and therefore ineffective. It needed to be about 3 to 1 to be an effective team. How does that compare with the ratio that you've just spotted? Perhaps food for thought. Now, they've done the same with married couples and put married couples together and watched them and looked at the ratio, positive effects to negative effects. What do you think would be the ratio that would predict happy long-term marriages? So write this ratio down. You've got 15 seconds. Should be easy, perhaps. Well, sometimes people go, hopefully 3 to 1 or even less. And in fact, it's more. It's 5 to 1. So perhaps, again, food for thought in our own personal lives too. So that's the first thing. That's the first mistake. The key is, how can you use this concept straight away? Well, if you give higher level feedback, you demonstrate higher emotional intelligence. So this is a way to therefore get the benefits of that. And one way is to be more focused on praising your staff. Obviously, you never lie. You will only praise people when you're honestly seeing that as a positive thing. But looking for more opportunities to praise is one very practical and surprisingly effective way to increase engagement and to demonstrate yourself a higher level of emotional intelligence. Now, as we progress through this webinar together, I'm going to give you for free the UHM report at the end, and this will enable you to understand how much attention you pay to feelings and give you an assessment on your EQ. Other resources that are available is there's a free article, Why You Need Motivated Employees, that's free on the web, and there's the book, The 7 Motivations of Life, that's being mentioned. So number 3 was giving ineffective feedback. Let's look at what number 2 is. Well, number 2 is assigning tasks incompletely or too completely, funnily enough. Now, the operational definition Task assignment, the allocation of a job or task to someone, the effective assignment of tasks. Now, there is a bit of a flip-flop mistake that I think most of us are prone to. We start by dumping the task on a person, and when that fails, we micromanage them to success, or what is supposed success. It tends to lead to the leader's frustration and the person's demotivation. Clearly not a good outcome. Now, good task assignment is sort of the middle way and follows the principles of project management, or good, sound project management. And the way to do this is to use a good model. What task assignment is not is SMART. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have heard of SMART, and there are many forms of it. Typically, it's specific, measurable, agreed, realistic, time-bound, and that's goal description, and that can be very appropriate, but it's not task assignment. If you rely on that to assign a task, you will tend to assign tasks badly. Why it's so important to assign tasks well is for two fundamental reasons. One is alignment. It provides the necessary clarity for people to be able to use their initiative to get the best task result. And have no doubts, the people who work with you have tremendous potential. That's almost consistently the case. And secondly, it helps with engagement. It provides the fair basis for recognizing and rewarding people for their efforts, which helps with satisfaction and motivation at work. So all work consists of a number of tasks, no matter how complex, and to set up employees for success and not failure requires a proper assignment of such tasks. And I'm sure you're with me as a leader that we all want to do that. So to do this effectively, it must be done in a way that works for all different cultures. More and more nowadays we work in a multicultural environment, and certainly for all different personalities and genders, so forth. The question is, how do we do it? Well, again, task assignment, and this is not micromanagement, I'd like to emphasize, has many opportunities to do well or poorly. We assign tasks regularly each day, and if we consistently do it better, it's low-hanging fruit again. It will actually help the team be more successful. And just need to do it a bit better each time, and because we do it so many times a day, it's going to have an impact. And if you do it a lot better, all the better. So let's look at the process or the model. To assign tasks completely, we need to remember PORT. P stands for purpose. We give the what and the why, the reason. There's a little apocryphal story of a man who goes onto a building site and he sees some people working away. He walks up to one and he says, "What are you doing?" And this guy looks very glum and he says, "Oh, I'm a carpenter. I'm putting joints together." He looks over and sees another guy who also looks glum, but he goes across and says, "Hi, what are you doing?" And the guy goes, "I'm a plumber. I'm laying pipework." And then he looks across and he sees this person who's working feverishly away. So he goes over and he says, "Wow, what are you doing?" And the guy goes, "I'm a mason. I'm building a cathedral." It's reasons that motivate, not outputs. A good reason to give clear purpose as regularly as possible. Then there's output. So once we've given the reason, output becomes important. That's always quality and quantity. We're going to come to the other things like money, time, but this is the value that will be provided. Then there's resources, cost and people. We often forget the people aspect. People, in terms of assignment, are a resource. Remember, in terms of leading them, managing them, they're not a resource. They are very different to a resource. But when you get to this stage, being clear about what are the people resources available that the person can call on. And last, the time. The end time typically, but if it's a big task, there may be milestones along the way, but being very clear about the time. Avoiding things like end of November. For some of us, that means 15th of November. For others, it means the 6th of December. Much better to be very clear and maybe say the 29th of November. So, to assign tasks, we just give PORT. Nice and simple. And surprisingly effective. So, let's look at an example. To provide customers with a good delivery service in order to grow the business through customer satisfaction and referrals. That might be the purpose why this manager is giving somebody this task. The task in this particular case is to deliver 110 fragile packages of product X, that's the quantity, with no breakage and to the correct one of each of the 3 major customer sites, that's the quality. The resources, 1 additional cargo vehicle and $2,000, that's the extra cost, and 1 specialist logistics, that's the extra people. Of course, in resources, you don't mention all the things that the person has authority over. So you don't say, well, you can use your team members, you can use your own laptop, etc. like that. And last, we give a clear time. In this case, to be at the customers by 0900 AM, Monday the 1st of May. Now that's taken maybe 2 minutes to give and would be a very complete way of making sure that people understand the task irrespective of personality style, culture, and so forth. In fact, did you notice the feedback exercise was written in the support? What I basically gave you was this, and you can see the first dot point was about the purpose, the second dot point was about the output, the third dot point was about the resources. The resource was a technique to use, and the fourth dot point was about the time you had. It just leads to greater clarity. Now, very quickly, how about you practice support in order to enable you to use it effectively back in the workplace? Practice makes perfect. So the output, think of 1 very simple task you're likely to have to assign back in your workplace shortly after this webinar and write it out in the form of a report. Use the report structure, and you have 1 minute. Over to you. Now remember, purpose is reason. What's going to motivate them to want to do it well? Output, remember, quality and quantity. There's always quality, we sometimes forget it. Resource is, of course, using this report structure. And the time. Okay, let's keep going. So, how to use this concept straight away? A couple of practical exercises we've done so far through this webinar, and we've just completed the second one, which hopefully you can use, but there are other ways. By giving ports, you basically increase your applied IQ, and I'm sure all of us would like to increase our IQ, so keep using port when assigning other tasks. There's, in the free UHM report that will be offered to you at the end of this webinar, it identifies which of your intelligences is more preferred and therefore likely to be higher. What isn't commonly known is that there are 4 independent fundamental intelligences, and IQ and EQ are, of course, 2 of them. Other resources, there's an article again that you can get on the website called Diving in Deep to Get the Right Staff, and a program which is available called the MarkTwo Personality Training, which will give you an opportunity to understand style in a very practical way and give you insights about not only natural intelligences, but how you can increase all of your intelligences. So, number 2. The number 2 mistake was assigning tasks incompletely or too completely, and I'm sure you're now much better protected from that mistake. Let's go to number 1. Number 1 is thinking your high performers are your high potentials. If only life was so simple. Now, definition for performance is the action or process of carrying out or accomplishing an action, task, or function. The operational definition for potential, well, latent qualities or abilities that may be developed and lead to future success or usefulness, but may not be obvious at first. So, it leads and explains the Peter, or to be gender fair, the Petra principle. Many organizations promote an excellent technical performer into a supervisory or leadership position only to see them fail. And this is often referred to as the Peter principle. Now, it's a two-edged sword, of course. It damages in 2 ways. 1, you lose a very good technical person. 2, you get a poor leader. And why does that happen? Well, when we look a bit deeper, it becomes much more obvious. Now, what performance is not is solely the short-term results. They're important, and without them, there may be no long-term results. But all the big results, the big gains, are always going to be in the long-term area. Research actually shows that only 15% of your high performers are your high potentials. That few. Conversely, and very importantly, some of your current average performers are actually your high potentials. So by understanding different intelligences, you can more effectively deal with people's different talents and help them and help the organization. Now, organizations are struggling to create the leaders of tomorrow. We hear that time and time again. And research shows that only 33% of companies claim that their leadership growth has improved in the last 3 years, despite all the development and the talent management strategies in place. A troubling 63% of executives believe their leaders lack the required abilities to achieve critical results, clearly flagging major problems. Now, there are two fundamentally different parts of work. There's the practical needs and the personal needs. One is around the technical ability or task ability, the other relationship ability. It's thinking versus feeling, using your head versus your heart. And this is, of course, where IQ and EQ comes into play. We've all got an IQ, all got an EQ, but we tend to have one that is significantly stronger than the other. Either our IQ runs ahead of our EQ, we prefer the technical, we prefer thinking, meeting the practical needs, or our EQ runs ahead of our IQ, we prefer meeting the personal needs, using our heart and feeling, and dealing with a relationship. So let's do a little exercise, which I've called performance potential. Let's take the bottom two of the 4 main role levels and apply the 2 intelligences. The 4 main role levels are as follows. They're technical role, first line manager or supervisor, second line manager, which is a manager of managers, and executive manager and board. Now, if we look at the typical work, we've got a certain amount of task work, a certain amount of relationship work, and therefore an ability linked to both. And in an operator role, most of the work is around task ability, getting the job done, linked to IQ. There is some link to EQ, how well they get on with team members and help empower others, but it's much less. When you get to the next level, first line manager or supervisor, there is still an IQ component, a task component, being a tactical level manager. That's what it really is, the manager at this level. But there is a much bigger component in terms of relationships to do with leading, and that's to do with EQ. So let's take a more practical look at this. Let's take 2 operators, Dale and Kim. Now, who has the higher potential? Given that Dale is currently a high performer, he has high IQ and low EQ, and therefore, not surprisingly, he does a major part of the technical role well, which is the task part. And lower EQ, it's not so significant at that level. Then we've got Kim, who's currently an average performer. She's got average IQ, but high EQ. There's a question. Who is the higher potential? And it's Kim, of course, to go to the next level. Because her EQ means she's likely to be better at a key part of the work. So there's a classic example of an average performer actually being a high potential for the next level. Now, a similar effect, but actually it's to do with the other intelligences, applies when people are moving to second line manager and to an executive manager role. So this Peter principle, Petra principle can occur at any one of these changes in moving up the hierarchy. And by understanding intelligence in a more profound way, we can make much better decisions, set people up for success, identify who are the real high potentials, know which high performers are high potentials, and vice versa. Now, as I've just mentioned, the Peter principles actually impact differently as you go to higher levels of the organization. And it's compounded a bit because we will tend to be biased towards those who prefer the intelligences we prefer and against those who do not. So how can we use this straight away? Well, it's to actually be good at all 4 intelligences, and they are EQ, IQ, which I'm sure you know, SQ, some of you may know now because it's becoming more recognized, and then physical intelligence. or capability, and that's strongly linked to tactical intelligence. Now, you'll be shown at the end of this webinar where to view a video describing a model to understand this practically, and that will be on the website. But other resources you can use, which will give you far greater insight into this. One is you can qualify at the Universal Hierarchy of Motivation Professional Coaching Accreditation. It's one of the public programs we offer, and you can see more details at the company website under public programs. And there are some other ways that we also look at this. We do cover the intelligences to some degree in the Transformational Leadership public program. So what are the three unknowns we have made known? In other words, what are the three mistakes which I've just now tried to clarify and give really practical ways to understand? Well, the third one is giving ineffective feedback. The second one is assigning tasks incompletely or too completely, funnily enough. Balance is often best. And the third is thinking your high performers are your high potentials. So we've just seen the research shows that only a small proportion, 1 in 7 roughly, of your high performers are your high potentials. Now, knowing this will enable you to directly impact your bottom line more effectively. So that's really it. But would you be happy if I described a program that we run that expands on these three concepts a bit more? And I've touched on it a bit as we go through, but it's a public transformational leadership program. Deliverables include, but they certainly are far more extensive than this. It provides you with a deep and pragmatic understanding of leadership and how it differs from management. Expands on self-awareness in a practical way so you can have a greater other awareness and realize your full leadership potential, which is naturally and specifically aligned to EQ. It leads to increased team engagement and productivity and helps minimize the financial negative impacts and improves ability to handle difficult conversations. And there are quite a few other very positive benefits it offers. Now, there are indications it's one of the best courses in its field around. It gets consistently good feedback, and there are many testimonials you can have a look at on the website. One example is just simply from Shane Myers, who said, best course I've ever done, but there are many, many more. A number from very experienced CEOs. Shane Myers is a very experienced manager who's done many top leadership courses. So that's one way you can practically start building on some of the learnings that we've tried to help you with right now. Now, we only provide this course typically to corporates, but through public demand, really, we started running one public course per year. And this course runs for 2 days. Numbers are limited. And for details, please go to the website and you'll see the programs and then public workshops, and it's listed there with all the details. Now, we also run a public course called the MarkTwo Personality Training, which helps give an understanding of the 8 different neuroscientifically based personality styles. So neuroscience is now supporting the model that this is basically used in terms of understanding personality cross-culturally, cross-gender, it doesn't matter. In fact, very interestingly, there was a major bit of research that's just come out showing that there are not different gender brains. In other words, there are not male brains and female brains. There are different brains, but the range of different brains is the same in men as it is in women. So there are these same 8 different neuroscientifically based personality styles, whether you're a man or a woman. And this model is so profound, it's spotted this, or actually the Jungian model it's based on spotted this decades ago, 50, 60 years ago. But this now has been shown by very good research very recently to be the case. So the deliverables out of this webinar, you've given me the gift of your time, and I wanted to make this as helpful as possible. And so some practical ways to help is give higher level feedback, enhance your demonstrated EQ, also use praise more specifically. Assign tasks completely using POUR. That will help increase your IQ. And recognize the difference between performance and potential. Now, as a leader, one of our jobs is to more effectively create and place leaders below us. That's a key job of any leader. And this simple model, it's profound in its simplicity, has shown you one key way to do that. Now, more information on that is in our book called The 7 Motivations. So more understanding of different types of intelligence and how to practically use them and what your preferred intelligence might be is part of the broad areas covered by the book, The 7 Motivations of Life. So what is available straight away for you? The opportunity to complete your UHM report for free. That's what I promised at the beginning of this webinar, and it's certainly there. Access to free articles from the MarkTwo informational website at any stage. You can access a free video on the model. You go to coaching and a motivational webinar. You can become an accredited coach and improving your coaching leadership. That's one key way to lead out of the 4 fundamental leadership ways. It's one, highly trainable and applicable both in your personal and professional life. And the opportunity not to miss the next annual Public Transformational Leadership Program. If you go to the website, you'll see that it's on the 15th and 16th of February in Melbourne next year. If you're watching this on the website, so it's after this webinar, and that date is gone, then there is another transformational leadership program scheduled, and you just go to the website to see. Now, please do not hesitate to contact me if you want to discuss any opportunities. And the contact for today, please send an email to inquiries@mark2consulting.com. Title the email Leadership Webinar UHM Free Report with that date and state your name in the email, and we'll send you a link that enables you to complete the UHM for free. That will save you about, it's usually $65. It's the personal UHM report. There is a free UHM report, but I'm not talking about that one. That is, of course, free, but we're giving you an opportunity to complete the personal UHM report, which is will give you much more information. If you'd also like an article for picking star performers sent to you, then please add plus star performers to your email. Now, I'll also be giving away 10 copies of my book to the first 10 of you that join us for the annual Public Transformational Leadership Program. And I will actually make this a policy for every transformational leadership program we run. So it doesn't matter when you're viewing this. If it's after the event, the next one, this offer will still be there. And please go and see programs, public workshops on our website. There's the book. And finally, thank you for watching. Thank you very much for giving us your time, and I hope you found it very beneficial. And enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.